This is the K10 Pro robot vacuum cleaner from SwitchBot. Now don't let the small size fool you. It's got a lot of potential packed into its small body. It can connect to various smart home systems thanks in part to the Matter compatibility that you get if you pair it with a Hub 2 from SwitchBot. The K10 Pro has great optical avoidance, and together with its small body it can get into places that would otherwise be neglected when cleaning. But I've also encountered a few problems with the K10 Pro, and I'll get into those later. Is the K10 Pro worth considering if you're looking for a new robot vacuum cleaner, or are you better off looking elsewhere? Let's find out together. First off, thanks to SwitchBot for sending me their K10 Pro so that I can review and test it. So one of the appeals of the K10 Pro is the comparably small size. This makes it perfect for smaller rooms or smaller apartments or houses, or to just get into places that would otherwise be difficult for robot vacuums to get into. I have this wine rack in my kitchen that admittedly doesn't get cleaned and vacuumed as often as it should. But because of the K10 Pro's small size, it's able to get under the rack and vacuum it. And because of the navigation that is on board of the K10 Pro that we will get into in a moment, the robot doesn't get stuck underneath the wine rack either. I had this fear that if the robot was small enough to get under the wine rack, it would get confused and stuck and wouldn't be able to move out from underneath the wine rack again. But the K10 Pro managed to move underneath the wine rack, then move out from underneath the wine rack again without any problems. So there's really a lot to unpack with this robot. So let's start with what you get in the box when you order it from SwitchBot. In the box, you'll of course get the K10 Pro vacuum cleaner itself, as well as the base station that empties the internal dustbin of the robot vacuum. But you will also get an extra dustbin for the base station, some wet tissues, because yes, this robot does some basic mopping as well, an extra filter for the dustbin in the K10 Pro, and of course a bunch of instruction manuals. In the base station, you'll also find a small brush that you can use to clean some parts of the robot, which I think is a nice little touch for SwitchBot to include in the package. So let's have a closer look at the hardware of the K10 Pro and the base station that comes with it. As I've already mentioned a few times now, the K10 Pro is a pretty small vacuum cleaner. It has a diameter of 24.8 centimeters and a height of 9.2 centimeters. For navigation, the K10 Pro has an omnidirectional lidar as well as position sensing detectors for detecting objects that are close to the robot. Both of these sensors work together to make sure that the K10 Pro can navigate as close as possible to an object without knocking it over. And it enables the robot to get fairly close to stuff like table or chair legs, and enables the robot to clean around it. It's actually pretty impressive how close to a chair leg or a table leg that the K10 Pro can get without actually touching it. The battery on board the K10 Pro is a 3200 mAh battery. This equivalates, according to SwitchBot, to 150 minutes of cleaning in quiet mode, or around 60 minutes in maximum suction mode. So in my testing, the battery life has been more than enough for me. Now granted, I don't have an apartment where the K10 Pro can clean the entire apartment at once. This is due to how tall the doorsteps are, which obviously isn't SwitchBot's fault, but the robot simply bumps against the doorsteps and isn't able to climb them. So I've only been able to clean one room at a time. But even if you encounter a situation where the robot runs out of battery during a cleaning session, the robot will simply return to the base station, recharge, and then resume once the battery is fully charged again.
Charging.
If the K10 Plus Pro runs out of battery before it has cleaned a room or entire house, and it does need to return to the base station to charge, it will take around 4 hours to charge from a completely depleted battery to 100%. When talking about actual suction power of the K10 Plus Pro, it's at 3000 Pascal. Now, this is on max mode, and the suction power will obviously depend on which mode you set it in, whether or not it's on max mode or on quiet mode. The noise level of the robot is around 45 to 59 decibel, again depending on what mode that you set it in. In my testing, I have found it to be pretty quiet in the quiet mode. When we're having it running in quiet mode, I would be able to sit in the same room and comfortably watch some TV. But on max mode, it would be noisy enough for me not to want to do something like that. So if we take a look at the dustbin in the robot itself, it's a 200 milliliter dustbin. Whether or not that's enough obviously depends on how dirty your floor is, but it's, in my opinion, a big enough size to be adequate for even the most dirtiest of homes. So moving over to the base station. It has a capacity of 4 liters, and whether or not that's enough depends on, again, I guess, how dirty your floor is. I'm guessing that if I run the K10 Plus Pro every single day, that I'll have to change and replace the dustbin in the base station every 4 to 5 months or so. If we take a look at the top of the base station, this is where the dustbin is located. SwitchBot sells extra of these dust bags in packs of 4 for $15. You can also buy replacement parts for the K10 Plus Pro from SwitchBot for around $60 on their own website. According to SwitchBot, you'll need to replace some of these parts after a year of use. And if you look in the app, it will actually show you when they recommend that you change out the parts. The power cord on the back of the base station can also be coiled as to not leave some wire hanging on the floor. However, if you were hoping that you could replace the power cord with a different length one or a different colored one, then you're not able to do that. SwitchBot has hardwired the power cord into the base station, so you're not able to actually change it yourself. I would have liked again to see this feature in the base station, as I would actually have liked a different colored power cord. In the lid of the base station, you'll also find this. This is the adapter for the mopping cloths. You will need to attach this to the K10 Plus Pro for it to mop your floor. Once you've set the K10 Plus Pro up in the app, you'll get the option to expose it to other smart home systems. You'll get the option to expose it to Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, Siri shortcuts, SmartThings, IFTTT, and a quick question here. How many of you still uses IFTTT? Like, I've stopped using it several years ago, but obviously someone still has to use it, right? Otherwise they wouldn't still be up and running. So how many of you actually still uses the IFTTT client? Like, I'm genuinely curious about how many uses it. And the last one, and perhaps for me personally at least, the most exciting one, Matter. I'm glad to see that SwitchBot has included Matter as an option for the K10 Plus Pro. They've actually done this with a lot of their smart home devices, and I'm glad to see that they're continuing this trend. If you do plan on exposing the robot over Matter, you will need their Hub 2 or their Hub Mini Matter. Otherwise, you're not able to expose it via Matter. You can still expose the robot to Alexa or Google Assistant or Siri shortcuts without the need of a hub. You just won't be able to do it via Matter. If you do it without the Hub 2 or the Hub Mini Matter, it would be a cloud connection between the robot to the SwitchBot servers, and then from the SwitchBot servers to the Google or Alexa servers. One weird quirk that I've encountered though is the fact that other smart home systems sees this as a smart plug. So whenever I want to start the robot from, for example, SmartThings, I will have to turn on the K10 Plus Pro smart plug. And whenever I want to stop it, I'll have to turn it off. It's a weird quirk, but it works, I guess. But other than that, I really have nothing to say about the connection between smart home systems. It has been rock solid and I've had no problems at all, and I've had 0 dropouts from the robot or from the app or from the app and the hub. So no problems there at all. So now let's move on to see how well this robot vacuums and cleans the floor. So my plan here was to weigh out 25 grams of oats and 25 grams of rice. And then just distribute it across the floor to see how well the robot cleans. I don't know if this is it's probably a bad idea, right? I will then afterwards weigh the contents of the dustbin to see whether or not it got all the rice and all of the oats. Okay, it's everywhere. Like, is this a dumb way to test a robot vacuum? Like, I've never reviewed a robot vacuum before. I have no idea. I guess we'll find out. Okay, so right away I can see that it hasn't gotten everything at all, but it has gotten a lot. And I think that when we are going to weigh the contents of the dustbin, we'll find, I'm guessing 40 grams. 42 grams perhaps.
Dustbin removed.
As you can see, it is full of oats and rice inside of it. So 45 grams of oats, rice, and, well, a few hairs and stuff. It's a bit better than I've expected. If I look around the floor, I can still obviously see some stuff laying around. But a surprising amount of oats and rice was able to be vacuumed by this thing. So when testing the mopping capabilities, I wasn't able to be as scientific as I was with the vacuuming capabilities. So as stated earlier, you'll need the mopping accessory. So after getting that from the base station, I got a mopping cloth. You install the mopping accessory by turning the K10 Pro over on its back, then taking a mopping cloth and wrapping it around the mopping accessory. Once that's done, you simply attach the mopping accessory to the underside of the K10 Pro.
Entering mopping mode.
The K10 Pro should automatically enter mopping mode and you are ready to mop the floor. Okay, and the floor looks yeah, notably cleaner, I guess. I mean, it's a wet wipe on the bottom of a robot cleaner. Like, don't expect miracles here. But this is what the mopping cloth looks like afterwards. All in all, I wouldn't say that my floor is the dirtiest in the world, but it was still able to get some extra junk that otherwise would have just laid on the floor. So I think it's a great extra feature to have. Don't buy the K10 Plus because of the mopping features. Regard it as a nice bonus feature to have. Now remember that the K10 Pro is basically mopping the floor with a wet wipe. So you need to have your expectations adjusted accordingly. So with the testing done, let's move over and talk about some of the problems that I've had with the K10 Pro. So my first problem with the K10 Pro is related to the sun shining through my window in my kitchen. At one point, the K10 Pro suddenly started spinning in circles and ramming the wall, and I had no idea what was going on. And it was kind of odd since the robot had been running fine up until that point, and I've had it a few days at that point basically. So I had no idea what was going on, and I thought something was seriously wrong with my robot. But then I noticed that whenever the robot went into the shade, it would run fine. And this prompted me to try and close my curtains to see whether or not the sun was in some way interfering with the sensors on the robot. And well, that fixed the issue. So this would happen only when in direct sunlight. So with the sun shining directly on the robot. It wouldn't happen if the sun was shining in the room in general, and it wouldn't happen if the sun wasn't shining at an exact angle. So while testing the K10 Pro, I contacted SwitchBot to hear if they knew anything about this problem. And while editing the video, they got back to me, basically confirming that the sun is the culprit. What's going on is that the sun gets reflected on very bright surfaces, such as my almost white kitchen floor, and then gets reflected back into the sensors on the bottom of the K10 Pro. This tricks the K10 Pro to thinking it's always near a cliff, which would explain why it kept driving in circles since it was trying to avoid the cliff all the time. Just wanted to include this as an explanation for what was going on with the K10 Pro. But all in all, I don't think most people would run into this problem, but if you do plan on running it a place where the sun will hit it directly, just be aware that it can mess up with its navigation in some way. So the second problem that I've had with the K10 Pro is to me at least, a bit more annoying than the first problem. It's the fact that on several occasions, the K10 Pro has been unable to dock with the base station. It would simply come in at a wrong angle and not be able to dock with it properly. I've mainly had this issue in the kitchen where again the sun is shining through the window, and I haven't really experienced it in any of the other rooms that I've tested it in. So my suspicion is again that the sun might be interfering with some of the infrared sensors or receivers on the robot and the base station, making it think that the base station is a bit off angle. Again, SwitchBot has confirmed that on very shiny surfaces, the infrared sensors and receivers on the base station and the K10 Pro gets confused. This would also explain why I haven't really experienced the problem in any other rooms than my kitchen, since all of the floors in my other rooms aren't as shiny as my kitchen floor. I have experienced this problem less and less over the testing period of the K10 Pro. And actually, when I wanted to film this for a B-shot, I was unable to replicate the problem, even though I tried several times.
Charging.
But those two problems are basically the only problems that I've encountered when I've tested the K10 Pro. So let's move on to whether or not I would recommend this robot to anyone looking into getting a robot vacuum. I absolutely love the small size of the K10 Pro. I think it's just the right size to still be useful, but small enough to be more useful than other vacuum cleaners. I actually have another robot vacuum. It's the one that's been behind me in the entire video. It's from Samsung, and even though I do like that robot as well, it's simply not small enough to use in other rooms than my living room. But basically the form factor of the K10 Pro is a huge plus. I'm also really impressed with the obstacle detection on the K10 Pro. I still think that it's kind of disappointing that the sun can interfere with the sensors on the robot as much as it did. And just to be totally clear here, this only happens on very shiny surfaces such as a almost totally white floor. So where does that leave us? Like, do I like this robot? Do I recommend it? Or do I think you should look elsewhere? I think that the K10 Pro has shown itself to be worthy of a spot in my home. It has shown to be able to vacuum in a proper way, and the fact that I can connect it to so many smart home systems is really essential to me, and I think a lot of people with a smart home. So I would definitely go out and buy a K10 Pro if I were looking for a robot that needed to fit a smaller space, like my kitchen or like a smaller apartment. SwitchBot is currently selling this at 600 euros on their own website. So even with the problems of the sun interfering with the sensors and the sun possibly interfering with the ability of the K10 Pro of finding the base station, I think this robot is worth looking into. But once again, thank you to SwitchBot for sending me their K10 Pro for me to test and review. I also might have some other SwitchBot devices coming my way. So if you are interested in seeing what SwitchBot has to offer, make sure to be subscribed. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.